Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 103. The Power Man himself, the hero for hire, Luke Cage. Side note, before we get started, this is going to serve as our season finale. I know we had previously said that we were going to take a break right around Thanksgiving. And then when we did the Mental Health Avengers last week, and then we looked at the schedule and we said, oh, this is coming out the day before Thanksgiving. Well, we can push clones back until January. That's not the type of episode that is going to, there's no time factor there with the clones episode. So we can push that one to January. Also, when we come back, side note, we will be opening with episodes on Maxwell Lord for the Wonder Woman 1984 movie, which is coming out on Christmas Day. Thank you, HBO Max. And then to tie into WandaVision, which is starting on Disney Plus on January 15th, we will be doing an episode on the Wanda Vision relationship. And then we'll get into the clones. So that's what you have to look forward to in January. Other thing is, if you're listening to this on the release date or like, a day or two later, I will be doing another live stream for Extra Life. For those of you who know, I have been involved with this fantastic organization for many, many years. And so on Saturday, the 28th, I will be live streaming my play of Super Mario 64, a classic if ever there was one. And I will be playing from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And in those 7 hours, the goal is get as many of the 120 stars as possible. And so if you go to my Extra Life page, and I'll have links in the show notes, if you go to my Extra Life page and you donate $5, you get to guess how many stars you think I will actually acquire in those 7 hours. And the person who guesses the closest without going over will win a $50 Amazon gift card. So all of the money will go towards Children's Miracle Network and Children's Specialized Hospital in New Jersey, 13 locations across North and Central New Jersey, helping to impact the lives of many, many kids every year. And this year we are focusing money on their COVID relief fund to help offset some of the costs for COVID care for the patients that are currently in the hospital that may have been impacted by the virus and just some of the other various associated costs. So good cause. You can watch me play a game that I know Doc and I spent a lot of time playing in high school. A lot of time playing in high school, time that we probably should have spent doing homework or studying. And Doc, in fact, was, and I know he's still lords this over me 20 something years later. He got all 120 stars in Mario before I did.
Yep. And that's with a couple of day head start on your part, because I didn't even have the game when you first got it.
Yep. So I was playing it. I remember Phil gave me the strategy guide to unlock all 120 coins. It was like photocopied in like piss poor black and white quality back when gaming guides, physical gaming guides were still a thing. We're old folks. So anyway, I'll have the links to my Extra Life page, and I'll be streaming that on my Twitch page, which is twitch.tv/Anthony Sitko. So you can check that out. Like I said, Saturday, November 28th at 10 a.m. So now that we got all the housekeeping out of the way, Luke Cage, as requested by Ruby, our present level patron. And Luke Cage was created by Archie Goodwin, Roy Thomas, George Tuska, and John Romita Sr. in Luke Cage Hero for Hire #1, June 1972. And so if you are at all familiar with the Netflix series of Luke Cage, some of his backstory and the general characterization is going to be very, very familiar to you. I think they did an amazing job. Che Hadari Coker and the crew, Mike Coulter playing Luke Cage. I think they did a fantastic job really bringing Luke to life and modernizing him in a way that made sense while still paying tribute to the roots of the character. So Carl Lucas grew up in Harlem with his best friend, Willis Stryker, but Carl left the gang lifestyle while Willis embraced it. So after Willis's girlfriend left him and sought Carl's help, Willis framed Carl and had him sent to prison, where he ended up was beaten and abused repeatedly by a racist guard. So he volunteered for an experimental procedure about cellular regeneration, but the guard tampered with the experiment in an attempt to kill Carl, and the procedure gave him unbreakable skin and super strength. So he escapes prison, he returns to Harlem, changes his name to Luke Cage, and he sought to make a living as a hero for hire. So he befriends Danny Rand, the Iron Fist, and the two of them partner up, and they have many, many adventures. And that's your recommended reading, by the way, is the Power Man and Iron Fist books from the 70s. Just classic Marvel stories. So later on, he has a drunken one-night stand with Jessica Jones. We did an episode on her. And the two begin dating after Jessica reveals that she's pregnant. And then they end up getting married and form a quite kick-ass superhero couple. So during Civil War, he and Jessica work as part of the Secret Avengers, which are aligned with Captain America, sort of working underground in the shadows, essentially, out of the spotlight, in opposition to Tony Stark and his pro-registration group. And then Luke later takes the lead of the new Avengers team, and he tries to learn how to balance a work-life situation, but he ends up leaving the team to focus on taking care of Jessica and their daughter, Danielle. And but he still does manage to assist heroes when Harlem or New York need saving. But the key thing is that Luke is definitely much more of a street guy than these global or space threats. Luke is not going to be the guy that goes out into space to battle on the blue area of the moon or take on these large monsters. But if the Magi is popping up in New York, or, Hydra's trying to run some shady stuff going on in Harlem, or just in New York in general, Luke Cage is your guy, especially if there's money to be made doing it.
Yeah. Just to add a little bit to that background, when the character was created, it was clear that what they were trying to do was get the zeitgeist of Shaft, of Superfly, of the type of, now we may refer to him as blaxploitation, but I feel like that's too demeaning. The whole point was creating someone in the comic book world that resonated with people that clearly were still trying to find their voice in a highly changing, volatile world. And although it didn't always have to be political, it definitely had to introduce people to the culture that a lot of people now think of when they think of the 70s and early 80s, and do it in a way that clearly is going to grow the fan base. So if you look at it in hindsight, sometimes the language that they use seems a little off base or just doesn't quite fit. It's because a lot of what they were saying, they had to really censor due to the code, but enough people that grew up in that era know exactly what they were trying to get across, and that's why this character has endured. And even with the reboot, it still keeps that feel to it. And that's what I really appreciate about it. And seeing Marvel, when they made the character in that image for the screen and watching it on Netflix, I thought it with Daredevil. I definitely thought it with Jessica Jones, but Luke Cage, for whatever reason, spoke to me in a way that says, this is the essence of why people get into comic books. Even if it wasn't the comic, this is what everyone has been waiting for pretty much their whole lives. At least that's the way I felt about it.
Certainly, I'm not going to disagree with you there. And I was going to say, obviously, as a black man, you're going to resonate with Luke Cage in a way that I could not. I will say that going back and reading some of those very early stories, the dialogue in particular, I think, was very much written in the style of, it's going to try to sound woke, or it's white people trying to write black, and it comes across as like the joke from Airplane. Excuse me, stewardess, I speak jive.
Right.
That over the top sort of style, like the Sweet Christmas, and everybody's like very flashy and showy and such. And so it definitely comes across now reading it in 2020. You're like, ooh, this would not fly nowadays. But at the time, he was the first African-American hero to headline his own comic book. And so it was a situation where, I don't want to say this as speaking as a white man, but at the time, it was one of the few positive representations of a Black hero that was present in comics.
Yeah. There's no question. You take what you can get. And that's the part, even the airplane skit that you mentioned, it wasn't nearly as offensive for many people as you would think, because the whole point on both sides, on one hand, if you're looking at it, yes, it's supposed to be humorous. On the other hand, it was more along the lines of, wow, this person's really trying to bridge a gap that they just don't understand. And that's what I noticed reading Luke Cage, those early comics. I appreciate the effort and the fact that it was being made in that realm when not many people were trying to. All right, I'll go with it. I can roll with that. And I'm putting myself in that era and saying, is that how other people would take it? And in all honesty, yeah, I think so. Obviously, if I'm wrong, or if my opinion is a minority of a minority, then I'm glad to hear other opinions. So please let us know. I don't want to pretend and say my view is the right view or whatever. I just wanted to make sure it was clear that's how I was reading it growing up.
Oh, I think that's definitely the case. And I don't know that anybody is necessarily going to say, oh, well, as a Black man, you speak for all Black people when you provide your opinion of Luke Cage and so on and so forth. We've established no race, no group is a monolith. So, but it is interesting to hear your perspective as a Black man on Luke Cage and on the history of that character. So let's segue then into the issues. So the first thing that I want to discuss is the fact that, and I did mention this a little bit in the background, he is a street level guy. Basically always has been, always will be. Luke Cage is very much focused on the small crimes, the small stuff, so to speak, but it does tend to have a more direct impact on the day-to-day lives of his community. So that does endear him to people, and it does endear him to his neighborhood of Harlem, but it does occasionally put him at odds with other heroes because they're looking at the big picture. They're looking at trying to save the world. And Luke is like, I'm just focused on Harlem. I'm just focused on my neighborhood. That's something that we've done some street level heroes, but I don't know that too many of them really key in on just exactly that focus and that mindset as Luke Cage.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And this is going to remind me of something that's been rattling around in my brain, I'd say, for the past 3 or 4 years, and I've never even mentioned it to you. I've always had this idea recently of a book, and I wanted it to be a total deconstruction of as many parables as I could think of and what they get right and what they ignore, because the idea of a parable is to tell a particular lesson. So with Luke Cage, it reminds me of the parable of the babies floating down the river. I don't know if you've ever heard this one. The idea that there's a local village that has a large riverbed, and usually they're able to fish, they have local farms, things are okay. And then out of nowhere, one day, one child is floating in a basket down the river, and I'm not referring specifically to Moses or anything. I'm saying the point is, the villager picks them up, and then there's another, and another, and another. And all the villagers now, they're dropping everything left and right to help gather these children out of the water and say, what on earth is going on? And there's one person that actually stops things, takes the time and says, I want to find out what's going on upriver. So the moral of that is supposed to be, when you have a lot of things that are happening in the immediacy, take the time to zoom out and look at the larger view. Focus on what may be the original cause. My counterpoint to that is, if too many people do that, then you end up with a lot of babies drowning downstream. So there has to be a balance. Luke Cage is a part of that balance. He's the one, because so many people, especially superheroes, have learned the lesson that you need to get to the root cause of things, that you forget to do the day-to-day, quote-unquote, menial tasks that we all take for granted. And I think the corollary to our regular lives is the number of times, and I'm just as guilty as anyone with this, of zooming out and thinking about what's my overall plan? What am I looking to do with my life? How are things going? And getting into all these esoteric philosophical discussions while forgetting about the day-to-day of what your regular work is supposed to be, or having just the standard conversations and contact with the people you love, and all of those things that really are what are supposed to enrich our lives. And I don't want to say taking them for granted, although that may be a part of it. It's more along the lines of finding a way to make sure that you're keeping the immediate contact points truly immediate, making sure that you're enjoying the moment and not just looking at the destination. So someone like Luke Cage that's in a city urban environment with a lot of people that may have similar struggles to him, that's going to pull him in even more to want to help those around him because they're much more relatable to him. And when you get to the point that you're dealing with other people that don't live near you, that don't always communicate with you on a regular basis about what's going on in their personal lives, but are willing to say what the latest supervillain is trying to construct or scheme against the rest of the universe, it really creates that disconnect that's going to create emotional tension. And Luke, although he isn't always demonstrative, he is very forceful. He may not try to yell and scream about everything that's going on, but you know he's in the room when he's there. And so someone that commands that type of presence, trying to say, niche down, scale back, don't worry so much about all those other things when right now we have someone that's suffering or someone that's hurting. What do we do for that one person in this moment? That may not end up saving the universe, but it does allow that other person to know that even people at someone like Luke Cage's level really does care. So I think we need both. This is not a rail against those of us that are looking at the big picture, but it is a good reminder for those of us that don't always stop and smell the roses. At least that's the way I like to interpret some of this back and forth that he has with the other heroes. One of the people that he connects with sometimes is Spider-Man, because at least he understands Spider-Man's sense of humor. He gets that he's a New Yorker too. And even though he's off doing his other things, when he comes to town, he knows that they're going to be able to work together. Some of the other people that he doesn't see that much, they can go probably pound sand. But once again, I may be interpreting that a bit loosely for the sake of getting my point across, but I think that summarizes exactly why someone like Luke Cage would be so much about the streets. It's because too many people are worried about like everything else.
It's the expression, to the world you may just be one person, but to one person you are the world kind of thing. The idea that it all does scale, and there is that perspective that Luke Cage understands that to some people, Harlem is their world. Like, yes, okay, we understand that there's this big, giant planet. And I think in Infinity War, Spider-Man puts it best. He said, I can't be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man if there's no neighborhood. So I do get on that level that there is a need for, as you said, the really big picture. But there is also it's the immediacy of the connection. And I think that's what garners Luke such fantastic goodwill in his community, because he's out there, he is present. You know, the folks in Harlem, they're not going to see Captain America. They're not going to see Carol Danvers. They're not going to see the X-Men. They're not going to see those heroes making a difference in the world, which they absolutely are. And and as you said, not to take anything off of them, but they see Luke. they know he is in their community. They know that he is working for them, both literally and figuratively. And we'll get to that, later on. But that he has that immediate connection. And that's what garners him the respect. And that's why, as you said, when he enters a room, he has that presence. It's not just his size and his strength. It's the aura of, I'm doing good, but I'm going to make it connect. I'm going to connect it to the human aspect of it. I'm going to make sure that the people are taken care of. And it's not just, we're going to punch this alien in the face and save the planet. It's, I want to make sure that homes are saved. I want to make sure that the people in this area are taken care of. And it's the people, and this goes to life in general. It's the people who are able to make those human connections on that kind of a level that I think garner the most respect and the strongest connection. And those are the people that you go to bat for. Those are the people that you'd walk through hell for, is the people that have your back and make that personal connection. I see, I don't know, celebrities all the time, and they're out doing great things. And I'm not knocking any of them, but if they're not making that personal connection, if they're not taking the time to get to know me and my area and my needs, then it's like, yeah, okay, that's nice. But this guy, he's a real hero, kind of thing. So I think that's an important thing. And that's, as you said, is one of the reasons why Luke is a hero that's endured as long as he has, and also been able to evolve with the times that we see, especially in the time of the Bendis run and New Avengers, etc., that he goes from being the stereotypical blaxploitation character and even just the palling around with Danny all the time to someone who could realistically lead the Avengers team and not be seen as, where this is like, is this a minority thing or whatever? Like, no, Luke is legit. He earned that spot. So that's credit to the character, and a credit to the writers for making it believable and realistic and grounding it in that real sense of personal connection.
Agreed.
So the second thing, and this is something that, again, doesn't apply to every character we've done. There are a handful of characters that have families, but Luke in particular is very much a family man. Like, first and foremost, he will not endanger Jessica, and he will not endanger Danielle. And so much of even some of the conflicts that we see between him and Jessica are over how much should they go out and continue to serve as heroes when they know that they have a child. And that does create some friction between him and Jessica. That's also one of the reasons why they have a superpowered nanny, Squirrel Girl, because they know that if somebody comes after Jessica or Luke and tries to do anything to Danielle, they need somebody there to protect Danielle. But the idea of putting family first and saying, you know what, I'm gonna leave the Avengers team because I need to be with my family. That's not something that we see regularly. And it does happen, but it's not something that we see regularly. And it's certainly not something that we've discussed with most of the heroes or most of the characters that we've talked about on the show. So just from that perspective, as we are both family men first and foremost, I think that at least personally, you and I can absolutely appreciate and understand that connection to our families, that we would do anything for our kids and our wives. But from a hero perspective, what is a little bit of a difference there with Luke?
So with Luke and his family, I think it also has to do with, depending on what background you're looking at or what experiences he's had. I know we talk about this so much. He's experienced loss too. It's not as if he takes for granted that everybody that's in his life is going to stay there. So he really does cherish the idea that people that care about him and that he cares about, he actually has access to them and can spend quality time with them. And yet, he's in an environment that has the expectation that when things go wrong, you're supposed to drop everything at the immediate inkling that something is going to be disastrous for something local to him or somewhere else in the universe, as we already discussed. So when you have the expectation that as a hero, let's bring it back to the real world, as a first responder, as essential personnel in your job, as the vocal leader of a local group that people will call you on to put out a statement, as someone that's a leader in your church, as someone who volunteers when no one else will. If you're that type of person and yet you know that you hold family close to you, you are constantly in conflict. And the good news is you can look at it as a potential win-win situation because no matter what you do, you're going to be doing good in the world. But on the other hand, from an emotional standpoint, for many people, it doesn't work that way. You actually end up starting to drain yourself depending on how often you're spending time away from your family, how long you spend your time away from your family, how much intermediate contact. Is it a phone call? Is it day to day? Is it weeks or months at a time? Depending on what your expectations are and what those other human beings' expectations are, because we know this is not in a vacuum. We may be dealing with Luke Cage himself, but that doesn't mean we can't consider the perspectives of his daughter or Jessica Jones. And if you want to know just how feisty Jessica Jones can be, listen to that episode. Then we know that it's not going to be always the greatest dynamic. Yes, we want people to support us, but we also don't want to feel like we have people that are quote unquote holding us back. So heaven forbid people are trying to make decisions, let's say about their career or a hobby or something else that may actually take up a piece of time. That doesn't mean that they're trying to weaken the connection with the rest of the family. However, for better or worse, some people may have certain conflicted feelings about that. And unless there are lines of open communication, some people, including someone like Luke Cage, may just let that fester for a while and not discuss it. And if those emotions are not discussed with the people that are having them, along with the original person, then you could kind of see you don't need superpowers to figure out how badly this could explode. So this is all something that's done in the background of our lives. This is something that we really do make a conscious choice every day. Every day that you spend going somewhere else, if you're going to a job, that is less time that you're spending with your children, with your siblings, with your parents, with your spouse. That doesn't have to be a bad thing, as long as you recognize it's a conscious choice. The problem is we all go on autopilot. We all take it as a system that is going to stay the same. And this year has proven time and time again that the more you think things are going to stay the same, then the quicker and more drastic they're going to change. So Luke is thankfully very thick-skinned, but that doesn't mean the emotions of Jessica and Danielle won't be able to pierce it. If he needs to think of that first, it allows him to make clear and wise decisions. If he puts it near the back burner, then he may find that he's more alone than he first realized. That's true for all of us. And I apologize if it sounds like I'm proselytizing. That's not my intention, but it is something that I feel strongly about. And my point is, as a doctor, when I'm away from my family or I get called in for something, or I'm taking that phone call after midnight or whatever it is, I always do it with the knowledge that I have my wife and my daughter right beside me. And if at any point that they express that they don't feel like I'm there, then things will change very quickly. I'm thankful that I have an employer that understands that and makes sure that they point out to all of their staff that family comes first. And for any of you, not that I'm saying it's an official call to action, if any of you have that feeling about what you're doing, don't put yourself in financial stress, but please make sure that you're considering what type of balance you need to create in your life so that the things that you consider to be your priorities are really put first.
Absolutely. And it's funny when you mention autopilot, the first thing I thought of was the movie Click with Adam Sandler, where he gets the magical remote and is able to fast forward through his life, and then it begins doing it automatically. And so much of the conflict in the movie is because he is on autopilot for most of his life and just takes his family for granted. And it isn't until the end of the movie, spoiler alert for like a 15-year-old movie, that, he's dying and he realizes, oh, I had these amazing people near me and I pushed them away because I didn't take the time to appreciate them and I didn't do enough things for them. And I got so caught up in the trappings of work that I forgot why I was doing all this in the first place. And as you said, with this pandemic, I think it's really shown a light on so much of what it is that we're doing these days. And I know, at least me personally, spending every day with my son, it's fantastic. Now, I love him and he's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And I am incredibly grateful and mindful of what it is that I do what I do. I do appreciate when I do get to leave the house, because it's that whole absence makes the heart grow fonder. But it's funny, as soon as I'm out of the house and I'm working in the office for the particular day, I'm missing him, or it's quiet. And I'm like, I enjoy getting to just go and give him a hug when I can, or he'll just come run up to me and ask me to read him a book, or he wants a snack or whatever. And it's just those little moments that I get to experience every day while I'm working. And it just really rings true that that's why I do what I do. And so that's why I'm going to therapy, and that's why I applied for a promotion with my job, and that's why I do all these things that I do, because it's about him. And I'm not going to do anything at the end of the day that isn't to help him have a better life. But also at the same time, there is that balance of needing to spend time with him and so on and so forth. I mean, at the beginning of this year, I was like, I need to get a job that'll let me work more, let me spend more time at home so I can spend time with my family. Well, I got what I wished for. Anybody who wanted to work from home because they wanted to spend more time with your family, congratulations, you got it. This is like the monkey's paw, like kind of situation. But it does ultimately, at least for me personally, and I do try and be mindful of this as much as possible, to your point, is, focusing on getting to see my wife every day, getting to see my son every day, and getting to just spend time with them and love them and appreciate them. And that helps fill my cup, so to speak, so that I can keep doing what it is that I need to do. And I understand that, it's the same way for you and it's the same way for Luke. So, and as long as each one of us, as you said, we'll make it the call to action, I suppose. Focus on why it is you're doing what you're doing. And if you find that your work is taking you away from your family too much, to the point that it's creating a problem with your relationship with them, do a reframe, re-examine, and see if there's something you can change. Even in the midst of a pandemic, there are still people who are hiring. It's obviously not all over the place, but if you can switch to a job that has a little more flexibility for you or offers you benefits that you don't have with your current position, certainly take a look. As Doc said, make sure you're still financially able to provide. I just don't want, I'm afraid somebody's going to come back. Capes on the couch told me to quit my job and spend time with my family. That's not what we're doing. We are saying take a reframe and just refocus on it. So for the third issue, I'll let you take the point on this one.
Sure. Something that I've noticed with Luke Cage, and foreshadowing, I even mentioned this in passing in the skit. Luke has an approach that is very common for many males in general when it comes to conflict, and it fits with his superpowers. He's fairly stoic, and I mean that not in the Seneca the younger kind of way. I'm referring to the idea that you make sure that you put on a certain level of bravado in public, and yet when you talk to the people that you care about, that's when you kind of sort of let your guard down, but you still do it in a way that makes you seem like you're the man. And I think that ties into as we noted before, the blaxploitation roots, but it's definitely more than that. It's something that I think is so commonplace. I was going to say in America, but I've seen it in lots of different media all over the world. So I wanted to address this because I think it's one of the most dangerous things that we have in our society. I think it's amazing that people throughout the centuries have been able to endure what they have. When you think about us dealing with this pandemic, we've just scratched the surface. When you think about World War I, and there's a reason why they were dubbed, quote unquote, the greatest generation. When you think of the atrocities during World War II, when you think of the Middle Ages, the idea that we came back from losing pretty much all of our scientific knowledge in vast parts of the world and still managed to not only recover it, but then have the greatest period of human production in the Renaissance right after that. This is amazing what human beings are able to do. And yet, I think the mindset now that we've taken is we tend to shy away from the emotional work that is necessary to process all of that on a day-to-day basis. And Luke, depending on how he's written, can really start to embody that. And if we glorify the idea that you just stuff things down too much, then we're going to end up doing what seems like short-term benefit, but then long-term detriment. I'm really calling out anyone that's doing this, and I'll admit I'm biased because I see it so readily in males, but I'm sure there are females that do this too. If you're listening to this podcast, first of all, I know it's less likely that you're in that category, but I know there are people around you that still fit that mold. And I just want to make sure that we at least are aware that that's what we're doing. That if we're just powering through to get to the next day by making sure we keep the bold face and not acknowledge anything, that at some point that's going to cut through. And I don't want that to continue. I want people to be able to feel comfortable. I love the phrase that's come about recently. It's okay to not be okay. That is something that I've come to appreciate more this year. I think a lot of people have. And maybe I'm the 50 millionth person to say that, but that's okay because that means there's still billions of people that haven't. So while it may not directly apply to Luke Cage, I've seen plenty and read plenty of his panels where that's clear what's going on. And if that's the thing that we're looking to model, I want to make sure that we do it from an area of strength rather than what I think it really is, which is a form of espionage for our soul. We're trying to hide from ourselves. And thank goodness we're finally, I think, up in a place in society where we really can discuss this, because I'm not even sure I'd be willing to acknowledge that we were talk about it this way, even on a podcast just a few years ago, because I would have seen it myself as saying, oh, wow, are we really trying to create more snowflakes? Well, no, I don't think we're trying to create snowflakes. I think we already existed. And I think that we're all so unique and have such intricate forms that when we get together and we're causing blizzards and we are, creating a snowball effect, how deep does this analogy have to go for people to recognize that showing sensitivity or showing a certain side, not inauthentically, but in a way that allows us to reconnect with what we've pushed away for so long, I think it would be better for all of us. So I didn't recognize when we first started this particular episode that we may be going on hiatus like right this moment. But now that I know that, I feel like that sort of thing is the type of deep work that we can do for weeks at a time. Just everything that Luke Cage embodies is the quote unquote ideal man. Strong, powerful, incredibly magnetic. And yet, you know that there's something under the surface that you don't always get to see. So I think we all have the opportunity to do some exploration. That's what I'm getting at.
doesn't have to be all dramatic and weepy and whatever. If that's not there, don't force it. But I think there's more than people realize. And we're finally trying to acknowledge it for what it is without embarrassment.
Beautifully said. And I would just say that I personally will be taking the hiatus to reflect on things. That's when I start my therapy session. And so when we come back in January, I would hope that our listeners will have taken the opportunity, certainly over the holidays, maybe make that your present to yourself is reflect inward. You know, we always focus on the holidays and giving to others. And I'm certainly the first person to say I would much rather give a gift than receive it. There's just the joy in seeing somebody else get something that you got them, even though I am the world's worst gift giver. But I try. I do. Take this opportunity, take this holiday season to give a gift to yourself. And I would say forgive yourself for whatever it is that you're struggling with. Forgive yourself for not always having all the answers if you think you need to. Forgive yourself for not always being strong when you think you need to. Forgive yourself for feeling all of the things that you're feeling. And then sit on that and think about it for a while and think about what it means to be in tune with those kinds of emotions. And if you can do that in a real way, in an authentic way, as Doc said, if you're not the type of overly, if you're not a piss eye, I'm a crier. So if you're not a crier, don't force a cry just because you say, well, I think I need to cry over whatever. But if it happens, don't fight it. I'm reminded of the Bruce Lee quote, be water and go with the flow. Give yourself the time and space to feel whatever the emotions are, acknowledge them, and then say, okay, what am I going to do with those emotions? What can I power with these emotions? If you're angry about something, say, what is it that's making me angry? And what can I do with this anger? Because it has to go somewhere. You have to acknowledge the anger, but then use it to drive you to something. If something is making you particularly sad, acknowledge it and then say, okay, what can I do with the sadness? The hope is that you acknowledge and accept the emotions and that it drives you to action. Emotion without action is just self-flagellation. But if the emotion drives you to do something to better your life in some way, then you will be better for it and the world will be better for it. And to Doc's point, and to circle this back to Luke, I think if we can all acknowledge and accept our emotions, be they positive or negative, instead of repress them, then we can all collectively advance as a society, because at least we'll be coming from a place of understanding and empathy that, okay, if you're really upset about something, I see that you're upset. What can we do? How do you want to acknowledge that? Because if you're not going to be angry just to be angry, but you're going to be angry to drive you and to motivate you and to change. And at the very least, if you can acknowledge and empathize with yourself and others, that's when I think we can start to affect some real change. And hopefully, if you start to do that a little bit over the holiday season with your immediate family, socially distanced, what have you, maybe you're on opposite sides of the fence about the presidential election, but take the time to focus on the emotions, and then what do we do with them? And then we all come back in January, hopefully a little refreshed, maybe a pound or two heavier, but we come back with a better mindset and able to go, okay, what can we do to make things better for ourselves and for each other?
Absolutely.
I always say I'm a pie in the sky optimist, and Doc is the cynic, but scratch a cynic and you find a wounded optimist underneath. So we are going to take a break, plug a couple of shows, then we get back, we'll get into treatment. Stay tuned.
I'm Harrison.
I'm Jordan.
Well, I'm Harrison.
I'm Jordan.
All right!
And we're the Grief Burrito podcast. Let us be your unnatural Sherpa guides on this existential plane of mountainous game and movie exploration.
And don't forget about that spookiness that lives within us all, but mainly in you, you spooky bitch.
How dare I'm offended.
We've been voted the best podcast to listen to by many.
By many, that means a few. That's more than one.
Results may vary. We'll see you on the next episode of Grief
Burrito, yeah!
Yes!
What is the perfect package? Well, it could be anything. Join Chad and Dave as they dive into the Perfect Package podcast. From the perfect first date to the perfect Old West gang.
I knew it was coming. I was like, where's my Hateful Eight pick from him?
Damn right. Of course it's going to be in there.
Each episode, Chad and Dave get 5 picks to create the perfect package. Then, it's up to the listeners to decide who will win each episode of the Perfect Package podcast. So get ready to explore everything from road trips to bank heists.
All right, I felt like we're on
dark.
Yeah, because I thought this was a normal heist. We might be breaking into like a hospital to steal our heart right now.
The Perfect Package podcast is full of laughs, some healthy competition, and a side of interesting tidbits. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Erica Schultz, and this is Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling.
And we're back. So, treatment in universe for Mr. Cage.
You know, it's interesting that we focus so much on how he likes to make sure he's taking care of this really tight circle, which is wonderful. But at the same time, someone of his abilities, let's be real, how many superhero characters, despite all the deaths that happen and everything else, because of the way he's constructed, he's able to survive. And to just say that it should stay in that small sphere, is that fair either? So I want to see if we can help balance that out. The best way that I think we might be able to do that would be to start having, and this is, I know, very timely for what we're doing, having some interactions with other areas. And I think someone like who's another doctor, someone like Doctor Strange, someone that is able to connect with other realms, someone else who's able to connect with other species, interplanetary species, but not at the level of, we have an existential threat and you need to save us. It's more along the lines of, who is the equivalent in that area for a local group? And it doesn't have to apply to their entire planet. And who would be someone that he could actually connect with? Having what I like to call nodal connections in different locations is actually a very powerful construct that I don't think gets enough play. Because I know, at least in healthcare, we do these conferences of hundreds of people, if not thousands, and we hear these keynote speakers, we get these different lectures for our continuing education and all of that, and it's great. But you ask anyone that goes to a conference, what are they really there for? They're there to mingle. They're there to talk to other people that can kind of relate to them one-on-one. Talk about different cases under similar circumstances. Maybe someone would have done something a little bit different, but at least they relate to exactly what you're saying because they had something happen to them that was incredibly relatable. So I don't think Luke Cage gets that. He puts everybody else in their own spheres of, all right, well, it's clear you guys are all the superpowered freaks and doing all this other stuff. I'm just trying to live my life. And that's okay. But if there are other people that feel similarly, or other species or other whatever that feel that way, then maybe he'll be able to take that leap and look at other ways that his technique or his view on how things should go can actually extend above and beyond where he is now. He doesn't have to do that on a regular basis. And as you said, he will step up to the plate if people come to his home turf. But my point is that if he expands just a little bit, if he just pushes his own boundaries, just that touch, then he ends up being a better hero. And I think because he exposes himself to other experiences, including the people around him that may actually become a part of his circle, he ends up becoming a better father. He ends up becoming a better husband. Because when you get to talk to other dads or other species that understand what parenting is about, or dealing with adversities that maybe he hadn't even considered, and doing it in that way, that's not as assuming as, by the way, if you don't do this, then our entire dimension is going to collapse. Taking that pressure away, that would probably be the most beneficial thing. So I would end up being almost a media coordinator for him as much as I am a psychiatrist. I would want to find out, how do I make those connections for you in an unassuming and non-threatening way so that you could still be yourself and still get some outside exposure besides exactly what you always stick to and know.
You want to make him a little more well-rounded, so to speak. Not that he's not well-rounded, but you want to put him in different situations so that he learns how to apply what he has outside of just, okay, these guys are robbing a purse. This guy's, these guys are trying to deal drugs, whatever.
Exactly.
Okay. I would love to see Luke Cage, Agent of S.W.O.R.D.
Nice.
Operating intergalactically. He's the muscle for an interplanetary commission trying to resolve the latest skirmish between the Kree and the Skrulls.
Well, I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, he has his own feeling on the Skrulls, especially when it comes to his own family, if you want to read part of that.
Yes. I didn't think of that when I said it. I was just trying to think of,
I
know. Yes. So out of universe then, and I think it's befitting Luke Cage that he's such a down-to-earth guy that I don't know what you would do differently. I mean, because aside from the impenetrable skin, etc., he's really a very human character. So I don't know what you would do or say differently, but I'll let you take the lead on that.
Well, I wouldn't focus on different species, and I wouldn't focus on other superheroes or galaxies or dimensions or whatever. I wouldn't do any of that. I think just the idea that he is an African-American male in a large urban environment who has a history of incarceration, be it fair or unfair, who has had a lot of strife with involvement in local crime and having parts of his family torn apart because of it. I wonder if there are any people that can relate to that. It's not like I did my training pretty much in that environment or anything. It's not like I wish I had done it. I wanted to get a t-shirt or make a sweater that listed where I went to school and then say over a decade of Newark education and proud of it. So yeah, this is something that I actually know pretty darn well because this is the type of patient that is so incredibly reluctant to come into my office or to go to a clinic. It is ingrained just naturally at this point to say, you don't do that. And I'll admit that is something that we as African Americans have been trying to get the message out that it's not a shameful thing to say that there's mental illness in the family or there are mental health concerns for yourself. And so first is kind of piercing that barrier. And then after that, it honestly becomes pretty standard fare. What's going on in your life? What are the stressors? What is your cognitive approach to all the things that have happened before, so I know what your construct is? And then examining exactly how we can adjust it, tweak it a little bit so that the emotional responses and behaviors that you exhibit are going to be more beneficial to you instead of harmful. That's what it comes down to, at least from my incredibly biased, because of my training, cognitive behavioral therapy approach. So I'm not saying anything that's outlandish with that. And to be honest with you, I probably could have just said that for Luke Cage in universe too. But I at least want to give some entertaining flair to it. So everything that we're talking about with this is very simple. You want to have the best life with your family. You want to make sure that you're doing the best job possible for your community. That's wonderful. Let's just work together on what makes you tick and what is going to allow for you to do that in a way that's even more enjoyable than what you're experiencing now. And if there are things that are not positive, that are actually causing you severe emotional anguish or difficulty with cognition, then let's see if there's a way that we can monitor that with medication or simply talk about it in a way that's not threatening and doesn't involve people that honestly have probably heard it from you so many times that they don't know how to process it themselves. So if it sounds like I'm really skewing this and saying, hey, Black community, can we please get together and make sure that we're getting the proper care that we need? Yeah, I am. Because once again, I think if I'm going to take a hiatus, I want to make sure I get as many great points as I can out there. So please. And it's not just that. Anybody that feels like they're in a community that shuns mental health, then there are ways to get help where you don't even have to create that level of acknowledgement. But you'd be surprised if you're willing to take that leap for the first time yourself and just how much the community around you might actually open up a little bit more. They may not. They may still keep their ears and eyes closed. But even if it's just one more person than it was before, then I think it can be beneficial for generations to come.
I think that's very well said. And I would certainly agree with you based on just talking to fans and having an ear to the ground as we do with this show, that it's not just the Black community that has, I don't want to say an aversion to discussions of mental health, but certainly it's not as well received as it is in other communities. It's not just the Black community. There are a number of minority communities where there is this belief and this pervasive mindset throughout the community that seeking assistance with mental health is a weakness and that any weakness is not to be shown. And I think, speaking as a white person, that it comes perhaps from a place of they can't afford to appear weak because they have to compete with white people, that they have to appear to be the ideal minority in order to accomplish everything that they need to get done because of this internalized struggle, because of the racism that it puts on the community at large. So therefore, we have to be perfect because that's how we can compete against white people. So
yeah, that's a great point.
At least that's, again, from my discussions with other non-white people and also just reading things, etc.
So there's yeah, I also acknowledge and affirm that it's definitely many different layers of cultures, not just even thinking of race or ethnicity. Also, as a doctor, doctors do not actively seek treatment. And I can tell you from recent surveys within my own employer's network that we have noticed, we've given information and provided opportunities for physicians to receive assistance if they felt it necessary. Just someone to talk to. No obligations, no extra cost, and no one took us up on the offer within the network. That says a lot. That basically says that that same feeling, that same thought is there pervasive at that level. And yet, I'm going to make one little tweak. The idea that someone can help you process your thoughts and your responses to external stimuli and the actions that are then going to produce a better result in the future based on how you frame things for yourself. If I change it from saying psychiatrist, social worker, therapist, counselor, I don't use any of those words. And all of a sudden, if I'm a CEO of one of the Fortune 500 companies and an overwhelming number of them use a life coach, and the number of physicians that I know that also have life coaches, all of a sudden, it's seen as something that you are doing right by yourself. You are actually just going ahead and being a go-getter. You are doing so much to make your company, yourself, your family all better because you are getting the right coaching. You change that one little term and you add a couple of zeros to the amount it costs, and magically people look at it as a positive. That's fascinating to me. That's something that that's something that I've observed so much. So I'm thinking to myself, so all this time, instead of us referring to ourselves as clinics and hospitals and all those other things related to mental health, if we had simply called ourselves mental fitness centers or mental enhancement centers and referred to ourselves as alternative life coaches or emotional coaches and made sure that we did glossy 8x10s with just how great everything was and how smiling we were with the proper graphics and all that stuff. Maybe that would have been way more effective than just giving the basic facts that you are not alone, help is out there. And we've had years and years of training to make sure that people are able to survive, let alone thrive. Pardon me on that last part. I'll admit that was a little bit of a rant. And to be honest with you, I think life coaches are fantastic. I didn't mean to make that sound like it was a negative.
I think mental fitness center sounds like a multi-billion-dollar idea. I think we need to trademark that and get it out there. Mental fitness centers, mental enhancement centers, whatever. Admittedly, it does sound like some Scientology type shit, but you know, they make money off of it. Why can't we?
Oh man. I mean, you know, I really don't have a comeback for that.
Hook people up to a what looks like a lie detector test and say, "Oh yeah, your thetans are through the roof, yeah, and your midichlorian count is really high too. Oh yeah, let's."
All right, so now that Hollywood is about to destroy us in one quick stroke.
That's all right. Tom Cruise doesn't listen to us. I think we're fine. You know, and it's we were doing so well there for a while. We were just we were really real. We were authentic and everything. And then I had to go and on it. I know.
No, it's not even that. It's that I sometimes I'll put these disclaimers after all that, and yet, in all honesty, because ethically I can't say I support Scientology. So if you lose me because of that as a fan, please don't. But I also understand, because I'm not going to pretend and say that I support it. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It's not based in science. Forget whether or not it's based in science. The fact that they are actively, I think, doing harm from a mental health standpoint for some people, that really rubs me the wrong way. So shots fired.
That's fine. We're going on hiatus anyway. We'll see whether or not we come back.
We're going to come back, people. Okay, I'll give a disclaimer for that. Yes, we're coming back.
Yes, we're coming back in January unless we get sued to high heaven. So we are going to put all this together in a skit. And with the help of our good friend Dave from the Perfect Package podcast, we are going to get Luke Cage on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Luke. I'm Dr. Issues.
Nice to meet you, Doc.
So what can I do for you? What brings you to my office?
I'm trying to figure that out myself. No offense, but I don't think I need a psychiatrist.
Well, was this someone else's idea?
Maybe, but I'm not trying to spread anybody else's business. You come highly recommended.
Well, I'm flattered, but I won't dwell on it. Come on, man. You seem like you're a proud guy. I mean, I don't want to pull information out of you. I mean, if you want to be on your way.
You always get this defensive? Not knocking you. Just give me a chance. Trust is earned, you feel me?
I feel you. I apologize. I have to process my own expectations. You exude a pretty big aura of strength.
Fancy way to say I'm yoked. They all say that. I'm tired of it.
I'm sorry? I didn't hear that last part.
You didn't need to. I'm saying, though, what makes you different than talking to someone I know? You're not Danny. You're not Jessica. You're definitely not Danielle. You're this fancy office and degrees, diplomas, licenses. How can you possibly do anything for me?
I'm not as out of touch as you think.
Ever been to jail?
Only to see patients.
Ever been in the streets?
Dude, I trained in Brick City.
Not the same thing.
I'm not trying to get fake street cred. You know, I'm not trying to say I went through what you went through. How could I? But have they? Your family?
Slow down there, brother. We don't need to talk about them just yet. We're not done talking about me.
Wow. What's with the chip on your shoulder?
Don't say that. Just don't say it. I'm usually a chill guy. But this office, not working for me. I'd rather be down in the barbershop or down on the corner, you dig?
Actually, I do. You know, a lot of people don't know about the barbershop. You know, that's what's up.
It's pretty smart, Doc. Meet them where they at. I like it. No pressure. Let's do it.
1 hour later.
Oh man, I can't believe you got us a local shop to ourselves.
Yeah, man. I know a few people that can get you squared up right nice. And here, we can talk. You want to know what's up? People got me stressing. Like, Power Man is just supposed to be the savior of this city. And I just want to breathe.
Gotcha. But you do save the city. You know, you're respected.
A little. Mostly, though, people just shook. I'm a little bit like the ultimate bouncer. My loved ones are the only ones allowed in the club.
Ooh, good analogy. You want low key, but everyone else wants you on demand 24/7.
I've tried splitting the difference. Make it my job. Get paid. Then I'll just be a hero on the clock. But there's no benefits for that. And every mercenary I've met had more problems getting out of the game than staying in it. And then I think about relocation. Nah, it's just gonna follow me.
There's an old saying, no matter where you go, there you are.
That would actually be nice for a change. See, I don't mind being myself. I like being in my own spot. I'm sure you're used to dealing with people that have their priorities all messed up. But that ain't me, Doc. I'm not about that noise.
Well, mindset begets expectations. I mean, how do you invite that silence so there's no noise?
I don't know. First off, I'm not totally sure what you meant by that. But if you're saying that I'm letting people get to me, maybe. But nobody seems to notice that.
Just an observation, but sometimes you come across as stoic. And that can make you look like a cool hand under most conditions, but then people can't really read you.
Like hell they can't. Let's be honest. If a big, muscular, black man is coming at you, what do you think is running through most people's minds?
See, that's called projection. You have a certain expectation of what people think of you based on appearance alone, but then you act in a way that's going to match that expectation. You give up control that way.
All right. But let me come back at you with this. Is it wrong?
Probably not. You got me there. Unfortunately, though, you can't control other people's mindsets, but you can control your own.
I guess that's where you come in.
Ding, ding, ding. You got it.
All right. How about this? You meet me once in a while in the shop. I talk to you, and I make sure you get your cut for free. Deal?
No offense. Based on going rates, that's way less than what I charge for a session.
Come on, man. Don't be bougie. I could offer my protective services for free to you, too. Money doesn't buy happiness.
Yeah, but neither does poverty, man. All right. It's a deal.
Now you just made the same type of decision I had 2 years ago.
Like I said, not as out of touch as you thought.
My man. Now how about them Knicks?
Yo, the draft picks they got, including that one that's like straight from New York, that's so awesome, man. Yeah, for real. Yeah, it's, you know what?
Thank you, Dave. Awesome job. Appreciate that. Go check out p3show.com for our friends Chad and Dave over at the Perfect Package podcast. I've had the opportunity to guest on the show a couple of times now, and one of these days we will get Chad and Dave on this show in some fashion. Not 100% certain how we're going to make that happen, but we'll make it happen one day. So that's going to do it. Recommended reading. If you can find the old Power Man and Iron Fist issues, either in trade, I'm sure there's Epic Collections, the big sort of catalogs, not catalogs, but you know what I mean, the compendium, so to speak, of those old 70s, late 70s, early 80s books. I think Roy Thomas worked on them for a spell, and Gene Colan and all those. I mean, basically, going back and looking at some of the names on those stories, it's like a who's who of some of the best talent that Marvel had at the time, of all time, frankly. Some of the greats worked on those stories. So go back and check out those stories, as well as the New Avengers run where Luke was the head of the team post Civil War. Some good stories there as well. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode, and that's going to wrap it up for season 4 of our show. As we said at the top of the show, this is going to be the season finale. We will come back in January, back from our hiatus after the holidays, a little refreshed, a little full of turkey and all sorts of snacks and goodness. And hopefully I will not be much heavier than I am now. I'm seriously trying to lose some weight because I got the Tough Mudder in May, if it's going to happen at all. Who knows at this point with COVID if there's going to be a Tough Mudder, but I'm certainly going to at least do some exercise to train for it. And if you've been checking out the Napod Pomo videos on YouTube, I'm going to try and do those a little bit more frequently. And maybe we'll see if I continue them past November and maybe into December over the break. That'll be something that'll keep me a little occupied and at least a little connected to the fans. So thank you everybody who's reached out so far, enjoyed the videos, connected with us on social media, Discord, Facebook group, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. We've got some good stuff planned for the show when we come back in January. So stay tuned to all of the channels, whichever way you follow us. We'll have some cool news. A little bit over the hiatus. We won't be completely silent, no new episodes, but we'll still be there. And then we come back in January, refreshed and hitting the ground running with some good stuff for the show. So, Doc?
Our emotions definitely lead our power, but be careful because they can certainly place you in a cage.
Ooh. Finishing on a glorious pun. So, for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much. We are incredibly thankful for all of our listeners, all of our supporters. Thank you. Have a happy and healthy end to 2020 and a joyous holiday season, whatever you choose to celebrate. And we will see you in 2021. Until next year.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.